Well, as many of you are aware, there was a controversial law passed up in New York and now a bill brought to the floor here in Virginia that have brought about some pretty extreme measures when it comes to the topic of abortion. I sat and watched the video of people celebrating and thought, what are we celebrating here? Are we celebrating more death, more emotional turmoil, more pain, more anger? What is it that's actually being celebrated? But then I just stopped and prayed and realized that there are parts of this discussion that aren't that simple. There are just so many layers politically, spiritually, morally, and even communally when it comes to this topic. But what do we do as Christians? And let me re-emphasize the word Christians there, because as we know, we cannot expect anyone who doesn't follow Jesus to have the same starting point or view on life as we should. So how do we infuse the message of Jesus into all of this and not just make it about politics? Do we just debate and challenge and protest? Do we just, go the route of just show grace and love? But I would say yes to all of those things to some degree, because they're all healthy options for us to actually see change begin to happen. But what we can't do is attack, we cannot slander, or we can't just view someone who is on the opposite side of this as the enemy. Even though this is the political issue of our time, we can't just dig our heels into one side or the other. The politics around this are way more complicated than it seems. And then voting just pro-life or pro-choice doesn't necessarily bring about the answer that we actually think that it does. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's for a whole different conversation. It's not the point of this video. But some may say, well, Wags, it's actually not that complicated. This is about women's rights. Or, no, Wags, this is about the life of the baby. But things aren't that simple politically. Just because someone is pro-choice doesn't mean they are pro-choice for everyone, nor does it mean that they are pro-choice and whatever that pro-choice means for them, that equals freedom or even the healthiest thing for everyone involved. And just because someone says that they're pro-life doesn't mean that they are pro-life on everything. Nor does it mean just saying that you are anti-abortion will even stop or decrease the amount of abortions happening in our country. So am I saying that law and politics don't matter? Of course they both matter, but it's still complicated, and we need to stop portraying that it isn't. We as Christians have to wrestle with the tension of grace and love and truth. And if we don't, or when we don't, we'll become no different than the Pharisees Jesus was so frustrated with and consistently called out because of their hypocritical behavior. There's also a reality that not every Christian votes for a pro-life candidate, and that they think pro-choice law is actually the best way to go, and many are well thought out in their stance. The folks that vote pro-life don't hate women's rights and are also well thought out. So we can't just judge people or put them in some kind of category that will demean them. They are fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. And the truth is that there's a lot more common ground than we realize. Some people that I know that are pro-choice and love Jesus are in agreement with pro-life folks on a lot of things. So much so that if people work together, there would be a massive dent put into how many abortions are done in a year in our country, which number almost 1 million, by the way. So then what should we concentrate on? The more practical side? Well, that too is actually a little more complicated than we realize. I've spent the last several days just reading different perspectives from counselors, OBGYNs, lawmakers, pastors, and watching interviews with doctors who have performed thousands of abortions just to get some better perspective. And there are some times where people are making unbelievably hard decisions, and to them, in that moment, just doesn't seem like there is a right choice. It is grueling, it is emotional, and people are just distraught over what they think they might have to do. It just isn't as simple as we think sometimes, especially if you've never been in that kind of scenario before in your own life. For me, and Lacey for that matter, the issue of life is actually pretty simple. We had to go the IVF route to get Max and Nevaeh into this world. And so we literally had the opportunity to see what they looked like through a microscope at conception. So for us, that is when life begins because we've seen it. For us, life is life. And even though there are scenarios that are hard to imagine, incredibly difficult to think through, life is still life. But even then, it's still bigger than that. And this is where I think the spiritual side comes in for me as a follower of Jesus. I believe in the dignity of all human life. I believe that not one baby ever conceived in a mother's womb is an accident, because I believe that in a creator God who forms us in the womb, who believes we are wonderfully and intricately made, and that has a purpose for us in this life and wants what is absolutely best for each and every person. So for me and Lacey, that part is pretty simple. But to ignore the complexities of life and law and living out faith in a country where people are free to believe what they want is also to ignore our calling as Christians to be able to walk alongside of folks all around us and to help them see and know the beauty and restorative life that is available through Jesus. Now you may say, well, that sounds great, but I can't just be a pushover about this. And we are talking about life, and I would agree. However, as always, I do have these questions, and I think they're important for us to begin to think about conversationally with folks around us. So let me just go over a few with you. How about this? How can we say we are pro-life, but not have the same intentionality when it comes to kids at the border, or the death penalty, or systematic education issues, or healthcare, or even how we think about war? How can we say that we are pro-life, but wouldn't adopt one of the babies that would have otherwise been aborted? How can we say we are pro-life if we don't consistently live lives that are overwhelmingly generous and look out for the orphans and the widows and truly anyone marginalized in our communities? Are we supporting organizations that are doing great work around this topic, like someone like the Pregnancy Resource Center? If you're a Hill City person watching this, are you giving in such a way so that we, as an organization, can even give more to those families that are fostering and adopting? How can we say we are pro-life yet vilify moms who are hurting, who need love and grace and folks to support them? Or how will those who have made this decision before or thinking about it now feel like they are loved and accepted and not judged? How are we helping them see and believe in the redemptive and restorative and beautiful message of Jesus? Here's some more for you. How can we say we are for vulnerable people like refugees and the poor and the kind like that, yet not be for literally the most vulnerable people in a mother's womb? How can we ignore what an abortion is and what they actually do to the baby? If you've never listened to a doctor describe piling body parts up next to the mom or some of the other things that happen, you should take the time to watch a video on this to inform yourself a little bit better. But how can we say that we are for women's rights, yet not for the women in the womb? Or the fact that abortion is so destructive for a woman's mental health. Why do we never bring up men in this? Why do we never hold them more accountable? They literally cause every pregnancy. So why aren't men holding other men to higher standards? Boys will be boys, and making lust normative has been a major cause in all of this. I have so many more questions that bring about many complicated discussions, and I'm certainly not claiming to have all the answers, but I believe that that's what community is supposed to be about, that we work together and try and figure some of these things out together. So we take complicated issues, we allow Jesus to speak into them, and then we do our best to kind of absorb everything and then kind of see what does it mean for the flourishing of all people from the womb to the tomb. I could get into a lot more with church history, with Bible verses, with statistics and things like that, but that's for another time. This is really about, I think, for us as Christians to assess our humility and our levels of grace and mercy, no matter if you're pro-life or if you're pro-choice. That doesn't mean, and I know this, it doesn't mean that it cleans everything up and it makes it so simple. It just means that we need to remain humble and loving and caring and generous and forgiving throughout our time here on earth. We constantly go back to what Jesus taught. We go back to how he loved, We go back to the challenge he often presented to listeners, and this is important, that maybe, just maybe, you might not be going about this whole thing the right way. History shows us that whenever that is the posture of Christians, God moves in miraculous ways and people see life very differently. So that's our challenge if you call yourself a Christian. Thank you guys so much for watching.